What's your experience of church? I went to church every Sunday from a very young age. It was a quiet, conservative church. We sang all the old-time hymns, and we didn't even have musical instruments. Then when I was 21, I changed churches. And this new one was super expressive. People would sing at the top of their voices. There was a band with drums, and people would dance. And when they prayed, it was loud. People were so emotional. I'd been used to solemnity, so it was all a bit confronting. I remember sitting up the back, ready to bolt out the door at any moment. Today I visit churches of all shapes and sizes with my ministry, from the very large to the very small, from the old to the new, from the traditional to the contemporary. And though I do have a preferred style of worship myself, I love the diversity of the church. It reminds me that we all have different personalities and different expressions of faith, and that everyone can find their place. But what is the church? Ironically, Jesus didn't talk much about it. He didn't specifically say how to build the church and what it should be like. These days, the church has come to mean very different things to different people. Let's start by looking at what the church is not. Firstly, the church is not a building. Did you know that church buildings didn't exist until the 3rd century? The early Christians met in the temple or in synagogues. Later, they met in houses, usually the biggest one in town, so that it could hold more people. In Jesus' day, the temple was a magnificent building. There's a scene in the scriptures that describes the disciples commenting on just how grand it was. But then Jesus strangely said that the temple would fall and then be raised up again in 3 days. The disciples had no idea what he meant. Later, Jesus explained that the temple was a symbol of his body. He was going to die and be raised again. Jesus was pointing to the meaning of the temple as God's dwelling place, firstly in the person of Jesus, and then in the followers of Jesus. So God's people are the temple of the Holy Spirit. We are the church. We are God's building. Along similar lines, the church is not an institution. It's not the programs, services, policies, or leadership structures. These just enable people to organise themselves in community. They vary widely and usually reflect the culture that the church is found in. For example, the Roman Church, with its bishops, priests, and dioceses, is based on the Roman governmental models that existed at the time. The Presbyterian Church, with its group of elders, is based on the Swiss model of leadership. The church in Indigenous Australia is often organised around local families and tribes. So the institution serves the church, but they're not the same thing. Finally, the church is not a political or national entity. Sometimes people talk about a Christian nation or a Christian government, but this is a misnomer, since the Holy Spirit only dwells in people, not entities. A government might express values that are consistent with Christianity, but Jesus taught that Christians serve a different kingdom to the world. God's kingdom is based on love, joy, and peace, where all the worldly means of operation are turned upside down. Wherever the church has been seen as a political or national entity in history, people have thought that just being born under that leadership makes you a Christian. So you can imagine the confusion. So back to our question. What is the church? Well, it's very simple. The church is the people who follow Jesus. It's the gathering of you and I, people who know God and live according to his ways. This is what defines and unites the church. Our style of church may differ. Our buildings might look different. Our institutional structures may vary, and our voting preferences may differ. But in the end, the church is defined by our allegiance to Jesus. Thanks for tuning in to Everyday God Conversations today. For more on the role of the church and how to have your own God conversations, subscribe to the fortnightly God Conversations newsletter at godconversations.com.